You are listening to the Batflip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back in, everybody. What do you guys think about that intro? I personally love it. I got to give a shout out to Jared at Belly Up Sports, the Corner Booth Podcast, for putting that together for us. He did a fantastic job, and he's just a big supporter of what we've been doing over here so far. So big shout out to Jared.
Yeah, thanks, Jared, and we appreciate you guys.
Well, before we jump on in, what do you think about this last week of the regular season we had?
It's pretty crazy. I was excited to watch it for sure, and it was a very entertaining last week. Not too many huge surprises. We had some teams on the bubble in the Reds. Basically the entire NL Central was on the bubble, other than the Cubs, and then the AL Central had that great division race to see who would get that division title. Um, and it turned out to be down to the last day for both. The Brewers got in on the last day with the Giants losing, even though the Brewers didn't have a great weekend. The Cardinals ended up coming away with that second spot in the Central and the NL Central, and then the AL Central we had the fantastic finish with with the Twins somehow pulling out that division after the White Sox had a 3-game lead with a week to play. Um,
Yeah, they
and
had to win. They had to win 2 of their last 8 games to win the
Yes,
division. The White Sox did, and they
and
won 1.
yes, and not only did the White Sox fall from the division leader and potentially the number 2 seed, they actually fell all the way to the 7 seed, and only getting in because of the expanded wild card. So that was pretty crazy. I thought as the Indians ended up catching the White Sox as well. So the White Sox went from first to third in the division in the last week. Um, and it changed the matchup that they're going to have here in the postseason. So,
Yeah, and
big
we
deal.
actually recorded part of this episode yesterday. We're now recording it on Monday, the day before the wild card round starts. And late last night, we actually found out that some of the seedings had switched based off tiebreakers and stuff like that. So that's why we're having to push this episode back a day. But this is it's jam packed, so we're just gonna go ahead and jump right on into
Yeah,
this.
for sure.
And let's start with the AL. You got the number 1 seed Tampa Bay Rays against the number 8 seed Toronto Blue Jays. Interdivision matchup here. They played each other 10 times this season. The Rays won 6 of those 10, and they have a clear advantage in the pitching here. I'm they're the Rays are going to start Blake Snell in Game 1. The Blue Jays are going with Matt Shoemaker instead of Hyunjin Ryu, which is a shocker to me. But with Glass now and Morton going Game 2 and 3, this heavily leans in the Rays' favor.
Yes, the Rays have their number one starter pitching Game 1 that or a former Cy Young winner, Blake Snell. Coming off injury this year, had a pretty decent year. I was surprised the Blue Jays pitching Shoemaker Game 1 and Ryu Game 2. That was a little bit surprising to me just because Ryu's been their guy all year. But I do get it. Ryu would pitch a potential elimination game or clinching game if he pitches Game 2, whereas Game 1, maybe there's not quite as much pressure. Although Game 1's going to be a huge deal in all these series to get that upper hand. Um, so I think it's interesting to see how that'll work out. Flip flopping your 1 and 2 guys. The Game 3 being Morton versus Walker, I think is very very much in favor of the Rays. Both teams pretty good lineups. The Blue Jays, have had them young guys that played really well this year. A breakout from Teoscar Hernandez. Bo Bichette playing really well. He had that little bout with an injury midway through the season, but he's back now. Vlad Jr. has played a little bit better as of late. He's a guy that has struggled to get the ball in the air. He's been hitting a lot of ground balls this year. So it's one of those kind of growth things for him to release his full potential. He'll probably want to get the ball in the air just a little bit more, start hitting those home runs because he's got unlimited raw power. But he's a very good he's a very good prospect still, and could be a big deciding factor in this series. The Rays actually, based on the metrics, the Rays lineup has actually been better than the Blue Jays. They've been very good as well. Good defensive team. They've got a lot of guys that nobody really knows too much about nationally, but are really good players. Guys like Brandon Lau and Joey Wendell and Willie Adames. And they can also mix and match with the best of them. So this will be an interesting series. Damien, who do you think who do you have to win this series?
I have the Rays winning this series as well. I just the Snell, Glasnow, Morton haven't been there. I mean, Snell's a former Cy Young, pitched in the playoffs. Morton's pitched, closed out a World Series. Actually, Glasnow just fantastic young arm, strike out everybody in the world pretty much. Another guy on the Blue Jays I want to highlight is Kevin Biggio. He's
Yes.
probably been their most consistent and best player this year. And with Vlad Guerrero and Lourdes Gurriel and Bo Bichette, he really flies under the radar. But he's a guy who I would like to shout out. He's a guy who could be very pivotal in this series. But in the end, I just think number one seed. Obviously, the Rays are just going to be too powerful
Yeah,
in this series.
yeah, I have the Rays as well. I think the key for the Rays is going to be their front two starters. If they are able to come out and command the baseball in their games, I think they'll be in good shape to win the first two. Um, I like Kenjin Ryu a lot. He's been in the postseason several times with the Dodgers and has pitched really well there. But I really do think the front two for the Rays have so much talent that they're going to need to throw strikes, and if the Blue Jays are able to get those starters pitch counts up high, the Rays have a very good bullpen. But all bets are off at that point. But I definitely am thinking the Rays are in a prime position to advance here in the series.
Yeah, the Rays can't let this be a trap series though.
Yes,
They
absolutely
cannot
right.
be looking past the Blue Jays because the Blue Jays are a young team who has a chip on their shoulder, and they've been playing really well as of late. So
Yep,
definitely, we both have the Rays, but do not look past the Blue Jays.
absolutely.
We'll jump over to the number 2 seed Oakland Athletics versus the number 7 seed Chicago White Sox. Athletics are throwing a curveball in here and starting Jesus Luzardo in game one. He's actually been pitching primarily out of the bullpen the last 2 to 3 weeks, so this is a big shocker that they're pitching him in game one. Going against Lucas Giolito. Giolito's thrown a no hitter this year. He'll definitely get some Cy Young votes this year. Bassett was just named for Oakland. Chris Bassett. He was just named the AL Pitcher of the Month this month. He actually had a .39 ERA for the month of September. Um, so they're pretty much considering him the ace, and the same thing with like what the Blue Jays are doing and pitching their best pitcher in Game Two against Dallas Keuchel, who he's been around, been in World Series as well. Very consistent, but he needs to command the ball if he wants to go deep and really help this team. If when he's not able to throw strikes, he is very much in trouble because he doesn't overpower anybody. He tops
Yes.
out at 86, 87. So, and then in game three, they haven't. Neither team has said which starter it's going to be. I would assume for Oakland it's going to be Sean Manaea. For Chicago, though, we have no idea who it would be at all. But this is a series where I am actually going to go with the White Sox here over the A's. I just think with the loss of Matt Chapman for Oakland, Matt Olson hasn't been playing the best. They're trying to fill in. They're pitching, the way going Luzardo against Giolito and then Bassett and Keuchel. With I just don't see Oakland. I mean, they're a good team. They do all the right things. They play fundamentally sound. Very good defensively. Take a lot of pitches. Just do all the little things very very well. But I just think with Giolito, Keuchel, the way Keuchel's looked lately, I'm gonna go with the White Sox here.
Yeah, so in my opinion, this will be a very interesting series, and this is a contrast the styles a little bit. The White Sox pound the baseball, and they have good starting pitching. The A's have more. They're more of a defensive oriented team in their lineup. So, in fact, based on the Fangraphs values, they were the best defensive team in the big leagues this year. Um, they can still hit the ball. They're pretty average at the plate, but they can still hit the ball pretty well. Um, but it'll be interesting because the A's have a great bullpen too. So you're looking at this matchup, it'll be definitely definite contrast of styles. I think the key here is going to be I think that Dallas Keuchel is definitely a key in game two. He didn't pitch very well for the Braves last year in the postseason, but he's got a lot of experience and he's pitched in the postseason in the past, pitched in World Series games. He's definitely a guy who can handle the pressure of a postseason series. I think the key is going to be for him to be able to get the ball on the ground, and because he's never going to strike people out very often, and he needs to keep the ball down and throw a lot of strikes, because his thing's all about location, location, location. It's a little different from the Rays talking about them having to, command the ball just to throw strikes. Keuchel's got to command the ball within the zone, and if he can do that, he could be very effective. And I think Giolito is one of the best pitchers in the big leagues, and has even more potential to be even better than he is now. So Giolito is one of the aces in the big leagues, and he's shown that he had this breakout last year, and he's gotten it even better this year. So I think I favor the White Sox in this series. The White Sox have struggled of late. They will definitely need to hit the ball better than they have in the last week. That they've got some guys that have been scuffling a little bit. They need to get Luis Robert going. Um, he struggled some down the stretch. Maybe teams are figuring him out just a little bit. But it'll be interesting for sure. I'm excited for this one, but I do think I'm going to pick the White Sox in the series.
Yeah, I just too much. I mean, if the A's had Matt Chapman and we're starting Mania game one with Bassett, I probably would have gone the A's. But ever since Chapman's been lost, they have not looked the same at all. And just not having Mania in one of those first two games and going Lazardo, first Giolito, I just that's a big negative for me. So definitely going the White Sox here. Well, let's jump to the number 3 seed Minnesota Twins versus the number 6 seed Houston Astros. They have announced the Twins have announced all three of their game uh, starters. Looks like Kenta Maeda is going to be going game one, with Jose Barrios going game two and Michael Pineda going game three. Houston has only announced their game one starter, which is going to be Zach Greinke. Pretty sure Lance McCullers is going to be a game two. And then three will probably be somebody like a Jose Urquidy, Framber Valdez, more likely just kind of an all around bullpen games on hand on deck if they need to have a game three. But I mean, I don't know. This is very tough. When we were talking about it before, we were both very much like the Twins, but the Astros, they're just starting to get their guys back, and you know, Jose Altuve's starting to look like himself. Alex Bregman's starting to heat up. They have Correa, who's looked decent all year. You have George Springer back. I mean, their offense is they've struggled for the majority of the season, but they're really starting to pick it up lately. But we really like Minnesota. Byron Buxton, Max Kepler, Nelson Cruz, Josh Donaldson, Eddie Rosario. They just have so many bats that they throw at you, and with the Houston's pitching, man, I just don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with it.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Twins are a very balanced team. The Twins actually, their pitching is for Fangraphs WAR wins above replacement. They're actually third in the big leagues, so that's pretty impressive for them. They've got they've got the couple good starters. Obviously, Maeda's had an excellent year, and then but Jose Barrios is very good as well. Their bullpen's good too. I mean, they've got guys like Trevor May, Taylor Rogers. They got some big arms back there. So I like the Twins in this series as well. I think the key will have to be whether or not the who the Astros are able to throw in games two and three. I know that game one they've obviously got a stud on the mound at Greinke who's very experienced in the postseason, and a guy who is he's as cool as they get. Um, but game two and three, I mean, you could see McCullers game two, but I know that he pitched over the weekend, so they had to pitch him, I think Saturday maybe, because they still had they still had to win to get in, so they had to extend him a game. So then game three, I mean, you've got Urquidy, Valdez, probably the two options for him, like you said. But I mean, I like the Twins. I like the Twins' offense a little bit better as well. The Astros, are, like you said, they are getting better. Altuve started to play a little bit better this week after his injury, after coming back. Springer's been okay. Correa's been okay. I just think that the lineups are, you know, you could even call them a wash. That they're so similar in skill level, but the Twins have, I think, the better pitching staff. So um, I have to go with the Twins as well.
Yeah, Houston just has so many injuries. I mean, we've talked about
Yeah,
Verlander
Verlander. If
losing.
Verlander was in this series, I might change my mind. But
I probably would too.
yeah,
I love the Twins, though. I love what Rocco Baldelli's been able to do over there with that squad, and gotta root for former Dodgers Kenta Maeda and Rich Hill. They did
yeah,
nothing but great things here in LA,
yeah.
so
And
always
and
gotta
Rich
root for them.
and Rich Hill could be an X factor in this series coming out of the bullpen because that's a different look he can give you with those curveballs.
Could very much be. Well, I think this next series is the best series that we might see out of the entire playoffs. I'm very sad that it's only going to be a 3 game series because I think if this was a 7 game series, it could go all the way down to all 7. But that's going to be the number 4 Cleveland Indians versus the number 5 New York Yankees. Game 1, you're going to have Shane Bieber versus Garrett Cole, which arguably is the best pitching matchup you can get in the major leagues nowadays.
Yep.
That game is going to be absolutely wild. I believe it starts at 7 Eastern time tomorrow night
Yep.
on ESPN.
Yep.
So
That's correct.
4 West Coast time for everybody out here.
Or that's
That
it's five West Coast time. Sorry, 4 West
No,
Coast.
it's
You're
4.
you're right. I'm
4.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm in the Central Time Zone, so when I hear 7, I think it's 5 West Coast. So
Hey, West Coast time's the only time that matters. It's the best coast. Uh, but you know, game 2 it's looking Carrasco Tanaka. Game 3 it's going to be Plesac for the Indians. They haven't announced who it will be for the Yankees. Our assumption will be J.A. Happ slash a bullpen. Um, but that game 1 is going to be fantastic. I very much look forward to being able to see that game, see Garrett Cole and Shane Bieber matching pitch for pitch.
yeah, for sure. Game one is going to be crazy. You know, it's going to be one of those games that a 1-0 type game potentially. You know, I
Watch
don't
it be
see.
like 7-6.
Yeah, of course. Um, but both those pitchers are incredible. Garrett Cole had a little bit of a bumpy ride through the middle of the season, but he started to really get back his form from last season at the end. Bieber has been the best pitcher in the American League all year. Uh, by a pretty good margin, so it'll be interesting. I like the Indians rotation in this series. I think Carrasco is good. He's a very under the radar. You know, after he was, you know, he came back from his illness, and you know, after a couple years ago, and you know, he's been under the radar. He's been overshadowed at times by Bieber, and you know, last year obviously they had Bauer, you know, for half the season, and they had Clevenger, you know, but those guys are gone now. It's Bieber, Carrasco, and Plesac, and Plesac's been very good this year as well. The thing that I would worry about for both of these teams is when those starters go down, who are you pitching out of the bullpen? The Yankees still have Chapman, obviously, but the Yankees have a couple other guys too. They got Zach Britton, they got Adam Ottavino. They can pitch those matchups a little bit better than the Indians, I feel like. The Indians have Brad Hand coming out of their bullpen. He's pretty good, but um, you know, I definitely am thinking that the this is going to come down to which lineup's able to get the pitcher out of the game first, kind of deal. And I like the Yankees' ability to do that. You know, they take more pitches. They're a more disciplined a team at the plate. The Indians have a couple of superstar players and Jose Ramirez, Francisco Lindor, but there's a little bit of a there's definitely a void out in the outfield for the Indians, and even though they have made some changes to try to improve their outfield, I like the Yankees' ability. I like, you know, obviously their lineups gotten healthy lately with Stanton and Judge coming back. I think the Yankees are going to have a they're going to be tough to beat in this series.
Yeah, one of the X factors for the Indians is actually a rookie. and that's going to be Tristan McKenzie.
for sure.
Um, he is going to be coming out of the bullpen, but when he's transitioned to that role during the regular season, he's looked very, very good. He hasn't given up a run. I think he's punched out in 2 innings. He's punched out 5. So he is a guy who can be very pivotal coming out of that bullpen for the Indians, especially after Carrasco or Plesac. I don't know how much you're going to need after Bieber, but he's going to be somebody that's very, very pivotal. I believe, to me, I'm just going with the Indians here. I just don't trust the pitching after Garrett Cole in Tanaka or Hap or whoever it may be. I mean, Chapman's nice, but he's a shutdown guy at the end. We've seen him when he comes into games that are tied or when they're behind, and he always doesn't do the greatest. Um, just look back to the ALCS last year. But I just go with the Indians here. They're playing very nice. The offense is firing on all cylinders, and the Yankees, I mean, with Judge and Stanton having come back from injury, they haven't looked themselves. They haven't looked to the MVP levels that they can both play at. Um, Definitely Luke Voigt and DJ LeMahieu can help that a little bit, but all in all, I just think the Indians are going to be too much in this matchup, so I'm picking the Indians.
Yeah, the Yankees have the Yankees lineup depth is got to be important, but yeah, as you said, that's a good point in these postseason series, especially these 3 game series. You only need 3 starting pitchers, so if you got a 4 and a 5 who are pretty good, like the Indians do with Savali and Tristan McKenzie. You can throw them out of your bullpen, similar to what the Nationals did last year in the postseason, being able to throw, like a Patrick Corbin out of the bullpen. That's a very important aspect that is kind of under the radar in these cases. So yeah, I'm excited for this series as well. I think this is going to be a very entertaining series, and it's one of the more difficult ones for me to pick. So
Who are you going with the Yankees?
yeah, I am going with the Yankees for sure.
Alrighty. Well, that wraps up our American League talk. So let's jump over to the National League, where we have the number 1 seed Los Angeles Dodgers hosting the number 8 seed Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers, because they were fighting until the last day, actually until their last out, pretty much on
After
Sunday.
after their last out because they
Yeah,
needed
after
the
even
Giants to lose.
yeah, what a terrible call, by the way. If you watched that Giants game, that umpire, I think they said he missed 27 pitches on the Giants
Jeez,
alone in that game.
it's awful.
Um, so that was, and some of his misses were bad, like 5 inches off the plate. Like it was very, very bad.
Yikes.
But because of that, the Brewers had to pitch their pitchers
Mhm.
to remain in contention. So
Yep.
they have not announced who they will be starting at all, which is actually very Brewer like. If you remember back to the 2018 NLCS, these teams matched up and they actually threw a fake pitcher for one batter. I think that's kind of where the whole 3 batter minimum kind of thing
Yeah,
started, was because
probably
in a
so.
playoff game, the Brewers threw left-hander Wade Miley because the Dodgers platooned a lot, which means they got a lot of the right-hand bats in the lineup to face the lefty. And I think they just intentionally walked the first batter, didn't they?
I don't
Um,
remember if they intentionally walked the first batter,
it was
but he
either
might
they
have pitched to
walked.
the first batter and then they pulled him like immediately.
Yeah. It was either he pitched. It was only like 3 or 4 pitches, so I don't know if he intentionally walked him or not. But it was right after that they pulled him and brought a right-hander in just to get the advantage. It ended up not working out, but that's just the kind of things the Brewers do, and they kind of have to because of their low budget and just
Yeah.
kind of have to find the matchups where they can. But they haven't announced their pitching yet. The Dodgers have announced at least Game 1 and Game 2. They're going to be starting Walker Buehler in Game 1 and Clayton Kershaw in Game 2. This is going to be. I, I don't know how the Brewers, with their pitching, is going to line up, but they're going to need MVP Yelich to come back. Christian Yelich has not looked like himself this year. He's shown little bits of flashes here and there, but never a sustained success from it. And if they want any shot to win in this series, they need Christian Yelich to be MVP Yelich again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at the Dodgers pitching rotation in this series, Bueller has been had a little bit of an up and down year. Kershaw though has been spectacular this year. I think this might be another case where you flip flop who would be your 1 and 2. Because I think Kershaw has been their ace this year um, over Bueller, but they might be flipping that 1 and 2, giving Kershaw that either clinch game or elimination game, depending on what happens in game one. So I think it'll be interesting. The Brewers, I know that one of those pitchers will be Brandon Woodruff, who is going to be very, very difficult to beat. He really did a lot to put the Brewers into the position that they're in the wild card series. Um, and they'll need him to pitch. I would assume he'd probably pitch game two,
Oh,
but
it's got to be game two. I mean,
yeah.
he hit a home run off Kershaw.
Oh yeah, I remember that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I know that when you look at when you look at the Brewers bullpen, you got a guy like Devin Williams who he might end up coming out and pitching, starting one of these games as an opener. But you got Josh Hader lurking back there who can always go out and throw you at least 2 innings out of the bullpen if you need him to. Which in a postseason format, I mean they're gonna use their guy. So the Brewers have some advantages there, but I think the Dodgers lineup is a lot deeper. I mean, they do need to keep they need to keep getting guys like Bellinger and Muncy going. I think that they've got but even if they don't get going in this series, I think Betts and Seager, who have been great all year, AJ Pollock's had a good year.
Yeah.
Um, Will Smith, the catcher's had a good year. I think those guys. I think that's going to be too much for the Brewers. It's going to be very difficult for the Brewers to limit that offense to the point where the Brewers' offense, which has really struggled, even if Yelich plays out of his mind or something, they're going to need more than just Yelich. They're going to need Arcia to step up and play really well. They're going to need Keston Hira to step up and play really well. They're going to need Braun to play like a vintage Ryan Braun. So I think there's a lot for the Brewers to have to overcome to compete in the series. So I think the Dodgers win the series fairly easily, in my opinion.
I hope so. But secretly, Cody Bellinger's actually been on a very big hot streak
Yeah,
as of
he's played
late.
a lot better lately for sure.
He finally, we've talked about it. I don't know if we've brought it on the podcast before, but we've talked about his stance a lot. I know privately between me and you, but he finally closed his stance off like I had been saying he needed to do for so long, because that's what he did last year. And he tweaked it and played with open it up. But ever since he closed that stance back up, I think they said he's hitting about 387 since that point. And one of the big things for Cody Bellinger is he's not trying to pull the ball and everything. When he's taking the power, he's actually going opposite field gap, which when he's on, that's something that is very, very big for him. So, I mean, watch out, Brewers. If you get Cody Bellinger starting to look like MVP Bellinger with Betts and Seager and Pollock and Turner, how they've all looked this year, it's gonna be a very scary situation. But
Yep.
well, obviously I'm going with the Dodgers, and I'm guessing you're going with the Dodgers as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, I'm for sure going with the Dodgers.
Alrighty. Well, this might be the second best series that we have in the playoffs.
Oh
I
yeah.
might even jump up and be the best series. I know you're not as excited for it as I am. That involves the number 2 seed Atlanta Braves facing the number 7 seed Cincinnati Reds, who, if you guys have followed along this year, we've talked a lot about that Reds rotation. They're most likely going to have the Cy Young and Trevor Bauer. You're going to have Jose Castillo pitching game 2, Sonny Gray pitching game 3. This is going to be a very, very fun pitching matchups to watch. The Reds are probably the team nobody wanted to face because of that, especially in a 3-game series. Maybe when it expands to a 5-game in the next, if you move on from this one, maybe they're not as much of a threat. But I mean, Fried versus Bauer, that's going to be a very good matchup. Fried's looked very, very good this year. Yes, he did roll his ankle, but he has thrown a bullpen since then, and he is all cleared to start. I thought game 2 was going to be Ian Anderson. Did they pull that
They
back?
they never announced it. That's the assumption is that it'll be
Oh,
Ian Anderson, and then the assumption for Game 3 for the Braves will be Kyle Wright, but they haven't announced anything yet. I'm assuming they're just going to wait till depending on who wins Game 1, they might change their mind on which pitcher starts Game 2. For the Reds, it'll obviously they have announced it'll be Castillo and Gray Game 2 and 3. Um, this series is going to be interesting. We talked about the A's and the A's and White Sox being a contrast of styles. This series is definitely the Braves have possibly the best offense in the majors when everyone's healthy. They actually finished in I think they were tied for the lead in the national and the majors in WRC plus this season. We're high in the ranks in on base percentage, which I think they actually led in on base percentage and in slugging percentage, which I believe they also led. So, and they also had guys injured part of the year. I mean, Ozzy Albies missed a lot of the year. Ronald Acuna missed 14 games this year. So that's going to be interesting to see. And then the Reds have the monstrous 1, 2, 3 at the top of their rotation, and Bauer, Castillo, and Gray, who have all been spectacular this year. It'll be interesting to see what happens. A couple notes on the Reds that their offense has been not great. They've really struggled. Some of their guys who typically are, very solid have struggled. Suarez being one, Eugenio Suarez. Joey Votto has struggled at times. He's gotten it back together a little bit, second half of the season, but he really struggled at the start of the season. Um, so it'll be very interesting to see that Jesse Winkers has been very good against right-handed pitching this year. It'll be interesting to see what happens here. I think the Reds have a monstrous advantage in their starting pitching, and I think the Braves have a monstrous advantage in their lineup. So it might come down to which bullpen is better, and I think that would definitely be the Braves bullpen. But at the same time, starting pitching can mask a bad bullpen if your guys go 7, 8 innings. Which it's entirely possible the Reds do. This is the hardest series for me to pick, and not just because I'm a Braves fan and wanting the Braves to win, but this is a series where the Braves have this history. The last couple years, in 2018 playing the Dodgers and kind of just being there was a big deal for him. But last year, fully expecting to win the NLDS series against the Cardinals and then choking it away, really choking away games 1 and 4, and then in game 5 just having that abysmal first inning. It's going to be very difficult for the Braves. Going forward until they win a series. I think there's a monkey on their back. They got to get the monkey off their back, and in order to get to where they're winning these series more often. And I think that talent wise, I think the Braves are better, but my gut just tells me the Reds are going to be able to win this series. And I think it's a very tough matchup for the Braves. So. But we'll see. This is the hardest one to pick in my opinion. I think it's a toss up really.
yeah, which we've said that this is going to be the matchup that is best beat best. Best versus best. Whoever wins is going to win by either their pitching or their hitting. It's either going to be the Reds winning by shutting you guys down, or the Braves are going to win by scoring a lot of runs. That's just the way something's got to give in this series. I just, to me, I just think that the inexperience of the Braves rotation, even though they have such a good bullpen, is gonna lead to some troubles. I mean, we've Bauer's been to the postseason, been to a World Series. Sonny Gray's been to the postseason, pitched in high leverage games. Castillo hasn't been there as much, but there's a
He's
guy
never been there. I don't think.
that no, he's never been to the playoffs at all. I mean, the Reds have really struggled lately. Um, but I mean, his changeup is disgusting. So
Yeah.
I don't know how the Braves do against changeups, but if they fair if they are not good against changeups, Castillo is going to be a guy who is very tough to face. But I'm going to go with the Reds in this one as well.
Yeah, and another factor in this series that hasn't really been discussed very much, around the big leagues, is that the Braves, how healthy they are, is going to be a big deal because Ronald Acuna's missed time at parts of the season. They held him out of a couple games this past weekend. just as a precaution. But you never know if he's not feeling 100%. That could be worrisome. And then they had a guy in Chris Martin get pulled out of a game this past week. The Braves' best reliever. It sounds like he'll be ready. He'll be good to go, but you just never know how healthy he is, and as well as Max Fried, who's pitching game one. He got pulled out of a game as a precaution after rolling his ankle, which you would think, just a rolled ankle wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's not something like an arm issue where he might have a shoulder strain or something. That would be really, really bad. But that's definitely going to be a factor in this series is how healthy are the Braves. If they're healthy, I think they have a good shot in these games. If not, then I think they are going to struggle to win the series. So we'll see what happens. This will be very interesting. So
Yeah. Let's go ahead and jump over to the number 3 seeded Cubs versus the number 6 seeded Miami Marlins. If you would have told me at the beginning of the season that the Miami Marlins, even if it's a 60-game shortened season, was going to be the number 6 seed in the playoffs, I would have told you were crazy. So the Marlins, you have to give a shout out to Don Mattingly, manager of the year. He better be the manager of the year, or I know there's going to be a lot of upset people. He has done a fantastic job. He went there, dealt with the entire rebuild after the horrible tragedy with Jose Fernandez, and then dealing with a change in ownership, trading their 3 best people, who 2 of them have won MVPs, and Marcelo Zuna could very much as well be in the MVP conversation this year for the Braves. So big shout out to Don Mattingly. This series, none of their pitching matchups have been announced yet. We're pretty sure it's going to be a Yu Darvish, Kyle Hendricks game 1 and 2 for the Cubs, whichever way they decide to do that. Believe it's going to be Sixto for game 1 for the Marlins with Pablo Lopez game 2. I believe that's what we said.
yeah, I think based on how they lined up this past week, I think the three are pretty interchangeable. But I think that the thought is that Sixto game one, Pablo Lopez game two, and Alcantara game three for the Marlins. And the Cubs, there's just no telling who'll be game three. My assumption is that it could be a bullpen type game, but they could start, like an Alec Mills. They could start Lester. They could
I think
start
it's got to be Lester at
I
this
think it,
point.
it
You know what
probably
I
does
mean?
have to be Lester. He's been really
Just
consistent this year, but he's got
just the
that
postseason
experience.
track
Yeah.
record, Wrigley Field. I just, even if they don't stick with him for very long, if they only start Lester for 3 innings, and then go to um, Albert or I always mess his name.
Alzolay.
Azalea, yeah, if they can go to him or Mills,
And don't
but
forget that Jose Quintana has come
yeah,
back, and they could go to him in a bullpen situation too. And this is another case like we talked about earlier in the show. You get in the postseason and you don't need 5, 6 starters anymore. You need 3, maybe 4, later on in the postseason. So the Cubs could use a couple of their starters out of the bullpen. That has been one of the worst bullpens in the major leagues. They could throw, Quintana, they could throw Mills, they could throw, it's depending if they decide to start someone else game 3 for some reason, they could throw Lester out of the pen. There's a lot of different options there that they could decide to use. And that's very helpful when you've got these 3-game series. You don't really need that fourth starter at all. So
right,
it's all hands on deck. And for the Marlins, you know, I think that their starting rotation honestly lines up to be even with the Cubs, in my opinion. I think that Sixto Sanchez is probably similar to what a Game 3 pitcher would be for the Cubs, and I think Alcantara and Pablo Lopez match up decently well. I think Darvish is the best pitcher in this series for sure, but they both match up decently well with Hendricks. So the Marlins could surprise some people here. I don't expect them to win the series, but I think most people are writing them off. The Cubs have really, really, really struggled this year at the plate, and the Marlins have some good starting pitching. And that could be a big deal. The Marlins have a couple guys who can hit the ball um, much better than people expect them to. You've got Jesus Aguilar, who's had postseason experience on that team. Corey Dickerson, who didn't have a fantastic year, but he's a guy who's been around a long time, veteran player. Um, you got Brian Anderson is a very good player that nobody talks about because he's on the Marlins. Garrett Cooper's had a fantastic year for them. Um,
Starling
and
Marte.
Starling Marte is another guy. He's been in the postseason before. He's had a good year and a trade acquisition at the deadline for the Marlins. That this team is better than people expect them to be. Um, I think this comes down to whether or not the Cubs offense can take it back to what they have been in the past. Javi Baez has had a horrible year. Can he go back into his almost MVP level form? Chris Bryant has had a pretty good last week of the season, but other than that last few days, he was horrible this year and has dealt with injuries all year. Is he going to be able to play like the MVP Chris Bryant that led him to a World Series, or is he going to play like the Chris Bryant that we've seen this year, who's battled injury all year? Anthony Rizzo has been good this year, but I don't know if he's been quite what Anthony Rizzo has been in the past. Schwarber hasn't been quite what Schwarber's been in the past. You've got a lot of guys on that Cubs team that have not been up to their standard this year, and this is going to be interesting. I think the Marlins could take advantage of that if these Cubs players aren't playing like they have been before. If they're playing like they have during this regular season, the Marlins could take advantage, and I could see the Marlins winning the series. I will pick the Cubs though because I think that there's too much experience there, and I think
Yeah.
the pitching, while the Marlins starting pitching is really good, I think the Cubs might just be a little bit better with Darvish and Hendricks being able to go game 1 and 2.
Yeah, especially with Kyle Hendricks pitching at home. His home road splits are crazy this year. He has like a under 1 ERA at Wrigley, but on the road he has like above a 5 ERA. It's so especially with them having to go into Wrigley, being the lower seeded team, Darvish and Hendricks matching up there, that's going to be very tough for them to do to beat. But like you said, there's too much experience here with the Cubs. I would not be absolutely shocked if the Marlins did win this series, but for prediction sakes, I'm gonna go with the Cubs here. Just too much talent and experience there not to pick it up. Well, let's go ahead and jump over to the last series, which is probably the series of the two teams that have come in the worst into the playoffs. Even though they're 4 and 5 seed, they've both really limped into the playoffs here. You got the 4 seed San Diego Padres versus the 5 seed St. Louis Cardinals. You know, Padres were a big thing, playing really well for a long stretch of the season, but Tatis really started struggling near the end of the season. Cronenworth kind of started taking a little bits of step back. Just everybody wasn't playing the way they were at one point, and they lost a lot of pitching. Kirby Yates hasn't been healthy all year. We'll talk about Mike Clevenger and Dinelson Lamet, who probably one or both could not pitch in this series. We're really not sure because Mike Clevenger left his last start with a sprained elbow. He had been dealing with some bicep tightness already. And then something happened. He got a cortisone shot now, and they're pretty much just waiting to see what his pain tolerance is and what he can do command wise and how his stuff looks. But I would be surprised if Clevenger pitches in the series just because of that. Dinelson Lamet, they were optimistic he could pitch game 1, but they haven't announced if he will be able to or not. I believe he was dealing with some bicep tightness as well. But usually forearm tightness is more what you're worried about. Bicep doesn't really affect you as much. But if neither one of them can pitch in this series, that is a big blow to the San Diego Padres. The Cardinals have announced all 3 of their starters they're going with. I don't even know. It's Hung Young Kim. Is that right? I
Believe
could be
so.
pronouncing that wrong. Apologies if I do. He's a rookie this year, so we don't know much about him. Especially it's Kwang Young Kim. Wang Young Kim. All right, that's what we're gonna go with that. They're pitching Adam Wainwright in game 2 and Jack Flaherty in game 3. Kim's actually probably been their best pitcher this year, but being a rookie, it's going to be interesting. He was actually started the season as their closer, and then he jumped into the rotation after coming off the injured list. So it's going to be very fascinating to see what he can do against this young Padres lineup. But man, the Padres just have so much talent on the offensive side of the ball with Tatis, Machado, Grisham's looked very good this year. Hosmer, Nola. I mean, we've talked about all the trades they've made. I mean, the Padres just, man, the Cardinals are really, really struggling at the plate, even though we don't know what pitching they're going to go up against. It's just so hard to pick against the Padres here.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you. The Cubs, I mean, not the Cubs, the Cardinals. Apologies to Cubs fans, they're not going to like that. But the Cardinals are a little bit similar to the A's to me. There's no real thing that stands out for them. They're not an exceptionally good hitting team. They're not an exceptionally good starting pitching. Um, I think the reason the Cardinals aren't quite what the A's were this year is the bullpen. I think the A's have a much better bullpen, but the Cardinals play good defense. They play sound fundamental baseball. They have some good players in their lineup, a lot of experience in postseason games. That they were there, went to the NLCS last year. With Paul Goldschmidt is a good player, good performer in the postseason. You've got Colton Wong and Paul DeYoung. Um, Dexter Fowler's a postseason hero from 2016, and has performed very well in the postseason. You've got a lot of guys on that Cardinals team who have been there. So I don't think the Cardinals are that good, and I don't really give them too much of a chance. But with that pitching, I don't know. I looked up Kwang Hyun Kim, um, and he's a guy that the Cardinals brought in from the KBO this season, and he's been very good. He has a 1.62 ERA on the season,
Yep.
but a lot of that has been some BABIP luck. He's got a very low batting average on balls in play allowed. Um, but his peripherals are showing pretty well. He gets a lot of ground balls, over 50%, and but his strikeout rate's extremely low, only 5.54 strikeouts per 9 innings. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch against the Padres. I like the Padres lineup. I mean, Fernando Tatis Jr., um, Will Myers has had a good year. Obviously, Manny Machado's an MVP candidate. He's very good. Trent Grisham. I mean, I think the Padres have a much better lineup. Um, a lot's going to depend on the starting pitching for the Padres, whether or not the Cardinals are able to really contend in the series. I think the Padres are going to need one of Dinelson Lamet or Clevenger to pitch. I think it's pretty likely that you do see Lamet in the series, but Clevenger, I'd be a little bit surprised if you see Clevenger. You never want to mess with elbow injuries for pitchers, but you never know. I mean, I know Clevenger's a gamer, and I know he'll want to be out there. So, um, Dinelson Lamet's been very good this year, though, and you would like to see him pitch in the series, get that experience. Um, it'll be interesting to see if about the Padres because they're a team that I think they're a little bit similar to maybe the Braves last year in that they come in here, have a great offense with this all this young talent, but they haven't really been there too much. This is their first cup of coffee in this situation, so it depends on how they handle the pressure. I mean, are you going to see a team that comes in and plays like they have nothing to lose, plays like they own the place, or are you going to have a team that comes in, worried about this, saying, "Oh gosh, we're in the postseason. Do we actually, can we actually do this?" and tightens up. So it'll be interesting. I have to think that they're going to the way that the Padres players are. Personality wise, I think that the Padres are going to do very well in this series. I think they're going to do well in the postseason. You're going to see guys like Fernando Tatis Jr. and Manny Machado really show out. Um, I know Trent Grisham wants to make up for his mistake in the wild card game last year when he was a member of the Brewers, making the error that really cost the Brewers the game. Um,
Don't
so,
even get started on that one because if he
yeah,
makes that play, we don't have to face the Nationals.
yeah. So, I think that you're going to see a very good, a very interesting series here. But I really think if the Padres pitching is able to be healthy enough, which even after Lamet and Clevenger, they do have some good pitchers. Zach Davies has had a good year. They have Garrett Richards there, who hasn't been great, but he has shown the ability to have a good outing every couple outings. He's really just been a little inconsistent. So if you end up even without Lamet and Clevenger, if you get a really good outing um, from Richards and Davies, pitchers like Davies has against the lineup that's really struggled at times, I really think the Padres are a shoe in here. I'm going to pick them, um, for sure. It's probably the easiest pick of the postseason.
And an X factor might be a guy who's really, really struggled this year for the Padres, and that's Chris Paddock.
Yeah,
He has not looked very good at all. But I would not be surprised to see them in a game where they need somebody to go to him. He's been, man, he has so good stuff. His changeup is disgusting, but I don't know. I don't know if it's command. I don't know. He doesn't look like he finishes his pitches enough. Um,
yeah.
he'll throw a
It's
good he'll throw a good one, and then he'll just throw one that hangs. Um, but if I would not be surprised in a situation like this if Jace Tingler just decides, hey, let's go to Paddock and kind of give him that vote of confidence, and if they
yeah.
can get him rolling as well, putting him with Lamette and Clevenger if they come back healthy, especially with Davies, that can be very very scary with the thought for the Padres.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that I've seen with uh with Paddock, and I don't know because I haven't watched him all that much this year, but I had read something where some of the analysts were talking about how his fastball is a little bit flat. So I don't know if that's been the case or not, but it's just something that I kind of read, or I might have seen it. I think it was Pedro Martinez talking about it maybe on TV, but they had kind of talked about how Paddock was maybe a little bit flat with his fastball, and that if he can get a little bit more movement on that, his stuff will play up a lot better again, like it did last year for the first half. So that'll be interesting. I'm excited for all these playoff series, and so
Yeah, and one thing we want to mention as well is that these series will all be done, I think, before Friday.
Friday will
They're-
be Game 3 for the National League Series. So
Yes. So by the time we talk to you guys again, all these series will be done, and we will have another prediction video, or not video,
uh,
another prediction podcast of pretty much the rest of the postseason. The
yes,
wild card round is 3 game series. They're so wild. We didn't want to do a full on prediction for the entire thing, but we will have that next week. But to break down our predictions for now, um, we only have one difference,
yep,
and that is you're going with the Yankees, I'm going with the Indians in that series. Everything else, we're both going Rays, White Sox, Twins, Reds, Padres, Cubs, Dodgers. So that is our predictions, and like we said, they will be done by the time next time we talk to you. So it'll be very interesting. And
yes.
let us know if you guys are listening to this before any of the games start, what your guys' predictions would be. That'll be one way we want to just try and get you guys involved is to share our predictions and let you guys do a little bit of predicting for those who have listened with us and know the game. But that's gonna wrap that up. So what do you say we jump over to the players of the week that we have?
Let's do it.
So who do you have as your hitter of the week?
So my hitter of the week this week is going to be Jose Ramirez. Before I talk about his week he had this week, let me talk about his overall for this season. In 58 games, he hit 292 with a 386 on base and a 607 slugging percentage. He hit 17 home runs, and that adds up to a 3.4 wins above replacement. When you add that great offensive work to his fantastic defense, he plays at third, which the 3.4 wins above replacement actually at the end of the season led the majors. Believe it or not, he snuck up there and led the majors. And in fact, that is also a higher number than he put up last season in 129 games. So what a good year for Jose Ramirez. He's been a very good player for a while now. Had a near MVP season just a couple years ago. But this past week, he's really carried the Indians. He hit 364 with a 517 on base and a 909 slugging this past week with 2 home runs. Had a 264 WRC plus, and that is spectacular. He didn't get exceptionally lucky at the plate either. He made some hard contact outs too. He didn't strike out much, walked a lot. This is a guy that he really has put his team in a position to win or to be in a series in the playoffs this year because he's been he's really carried that team. Lindor has been good, but he hasn't been quite what he usually is. So they really needed a big year from Jose Ramirez, and he's delivered it. He's my MVP candidate or my MVP pick for the American League. So I really like what this last week solidified that in my opinion.
Yeah, we will. We'll do some predictions for MVP and postseason or awards. Maybe next week. Might do
Yeah,
that.
sounds
See
good.
what we got to break down. Well, my hitter of the week is a rookie. His name is Ke'Bryan Hayes from the Pittsburgh Pirates. A couple interesting notes that made me pick him were over this weekend he had 8 straight at bats with a hit, which is unheard of at one point. Over this week he's batted 519, 567 on base, and 852 slug. Almost put up a full win above replacement. His weighted runs created is a 276. He had a couple home runs, but the most interesting fact I found about him was that he will be the first player to in history to get rookie of the year votes in back-to-back seasons. So the way the rookie number happened between the whole COVID season and last year, he didn't meet rookie eligibility to lose his rookie status, I should say, from last season. But he came up, played enough games to where people felt he made an impact, so he got some rookie of the year votes. Was never really a real threat to win it, but since he's come up this year and he's played a lot of games this year, he will get more rookie of the year votes this year as well. Still don't think he has a shot to win it, but that's pretty cool for something that's never happened in history for him to be the first player to get rookie of the year votes in back-to-back
For, s-
seasons. It's
for
pretty fascinating.
for sure. And I do want to make one honorable mention this week. I picked Jose Ramirez because of his team being in that pennant chase. But I do want to mention how Adalberto Mondesi did this week. He hit
Mhm.
615 this week. So
Yeah,
in any other week, I probably would have picked him. But with the postseason coming up and this being the last week in the pennant chase, I went ahead and picked Jose Ramirez. But 615 for Adalberto Mondesi this week is pretty crazy, and that also included 2 home runs and 5 stolen bases. So
yeah.
it's the
Five
guy we
stolen bases in a week is
yeah,
insane.
that's a lot. Of course, if you're getting on base at a 655 clip that he did this week, you got a lot of chances to run. So um, he
Yeah,
had a great week, it was kind of more of that Adalberto Mondesi that we expected to see break out at some point. We'll see, maybe this last week with him playing so well, maybe it boosts him going forward, the start of next year. So
hopefully. He was
um,
almost my pick as well, but
yeah.
well, I'll go ahead and just keep along with my pitcher of the week. Actually, pretty funny. My hitter and pitcher of the week are both from the Pittsburgh Pirates, who have been the worst team in the majors this year. They will have the number one draft pick in next year's MLB draft, but I will be going with pitcher Joe Musgrove. He's a guy who was a part of the big Garrett Cole trade when Garrett Cole got traded from the Pirates to the Houston Astros. Him and Colin Moran were the two big kind of names in that deal. And Musgrove's really struggled to find consistency, but he has these weeks and even a month at some point when he gets on a very good hot streak. And over his last, it was 13 innings, he gave up 6 hits, 2 walks, and 21 strikeouts. That is insane. That adds up to a 1286 strikeouts per nine. Didn't give up a run. Uh, what do you have? Look at this, a 1.29 walks per nine. Got ground balls at a 61.5% rate, which is very, very high. Um, it just a very good week from Joe Musgrove, and especially being on one of the bad teams, I felt he deserved a shout out.
Yeah, I got you. That sounds like maybe the Braves should have made that trade that they had talked about with the Pirates with Joe
Yeah,
Musgrove. Um,
probably.
that would have been a big help for them in the postseason. So, but yeah, my pick is going to be Brandon Woodruff. The Brewers lost Corbin Burns, a couple weeks ago, and for at least for this first postseason series, and possibly the more, should they advance. But the Brewers have Brandon Woodruff has been a very good pitcher for the last couple years. Um, he had a fantastic week, put the Brewers on his back really. 13 and 2/3 innings pitched this week. He put up a 12.51 strikeout per nine and 1.98 walk per nine week. Um, his ground ball rate's always very good as well. He's had a lot of ground ball outs. Just a a guy who the Brewers had to have him have a good week. He's really their one guy that's a solid starting pitcher after the injuries that they've had, and he had that week, and he's pretty much the main reason that they were able to sneak into the playoffs over the Giants. So that's that's a spectacular way to finish his season, which has been a very good season. So I'm picking Brandon Woodruff. Who is your pitcher? Oh,
It was
you
Joe
said
Musgrove.
Joe Musgrove. That's right. So
Yeah,
that's good. One other guy that I wanted to mention that had a very good season. An honorable mention maybe is Marco Gonzalez had a good week this week too, and
yeah.
he actually put up a fantastic season, under 1 walk per nine, and 3.10 ERA in 69 and 2/3 innings. He had a
Sounds
great
like
season, and he had a
should have
great.
made that trade.
Yeah, that's true. But he had a good finish to his season as well, with 13 innings pitched this last week and a 1.38 ERA. So that's that was a very good finish to his season.
Yeah, I would feel a lot more comfortable if Marco Gonzalez was starting game 2 for the New York Yankees than Masahiro Tanaka.
Yeah.
So very shout out to Gonzalez though. He guy who's been traded before and got a
Yeah.
big extension from the Mariners after you know he didn't have the greatest years. He was solid, but never fantastic. And this year was a big breakout year for him.
Yeah, he's always been a number 3 or 4 type pitcher, and this year he became more of a number 2.
He took that next step.
That
So
step.
shout out to Marco Gonzalez. But that will wrap up our wild card preview, breakdown, prediction episode. This was very fun. I'm sad that the regular season is over, but nothing nothing will cure that sadness more than postseason baseball.
It's the best.
Uh,
It's the best baseball of the year, the postseason, and everybody, that this is the goal for every team coming into the season is to make it here and then figure it out once you get here. And I think we've got 16 teams here that are going to be very good. I'm not huge on that whole expanded postseason thing yet, but I think it's going to be it works for a 60 game season because of a lack of sample size, and it's going to be very interesting. I mean, you got a couple teams that haven't been here, 3 teams in the National League that haven't been here in a long time. Um, in the Reds, the Marlins, and the Padres, and you're going to have some teams that are really excited to be here in the American League as well, with the White Sox being there, haven't been there in a long time. This is going to be a very, very, very exciting postseason. You're going to see, I mean, what do we have? 8 games, 8 postseason baseball games on Wednesday,
yeah,
starting from going from noon Eastern to probably at least midnight Eastern for the Dodgers game. I mean, it's going to be crazy. So very excited. I'm going to be sitting back watching a lot of baseball, and I'm sure you will too. And it's going to be a fun week.
yeah, man. This screw this whole coronavirus, man. I mean, this would have been so fun having 50,000 people
Oh
packed
my
into stands
gosh.
screaming. Like, could you imagine what some of the reactions you'd get for that Cole or Bieber game, or
Oh
what
my
the
gosh.
Padres would do if Tatis hit a big home run? I mean, man, just the thought of that just gives me chills. Unfortunately, we can't have that because of coronavirus. You're being stupid. Go away.
Maybe
Uh,
I'm sure we'll get it back next year. So
Hopefully, I mean, there's some rumors that maybe within the bubble for the World Series they might have some
they might have
fans.
some fans. I don't know if we'll see that. So
It obviously won't be the 50,000 like we
right.
want it to be. But anyways, well, thank you guys for listening in. Hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. Sorry it's a day late, but we wanted to make sure we had everything right before we brought it to you, so you guys could get the best up to date information before these games start. So thank you guys for listening to this episode, and we will catch you guys on Sunday.
Yep. Thanks everybody.